Give a warm welcome to Academy Award-winning editor Billy Goldenberg. Thanks for being here, Billy. First question. One of the most interesting things to me watching the film a few times is that the protagonist isn't who we think who he is. And all of a sudden we find out that the importance of Dolores Jordan in the film. Can you tell us about navigating that story?
Well, the funny thing is about it is that originally, as written, James, this dad, was going to be the more central focus of the film, and then Ben went to Florida. I'm not sure it was Miami, but in Florida, went to Florida to visit Michael. I think a month before we started shooting, to make sure that not to get Michael's blessing on the script, just to make sure that Michael was in principle okay with making this film. Because if Michael was not, then they weren't going to make the movie. So, but what happened when they met was that Michael explained that Dolores she ran things, as says, it was a direct quote from Michael into the movie. The mom ran things, and James was a great guy, but she ran everything. So then they rewrote the script to make it more focused on Dolores, which was just fantastic. And actually, Michael said to Ben, I want Viola Davis to play my mom. And Ben said, well, it doesn't quite work that way. Well, ask her. But and then, obviously she said yes, and we were thrilled. But that's what made me love the story so much, was that it's a story about a mom like that. I think it separates it from being a sports movie. It makes it about family. It makes it about standing up for yourself. And cutting those scenes between Matt and Viola was just one of the thrills of a lifetime, because I've been a big fan of both those actors for my whole career, and this first time I ever got to work with them, so it was quite extraordinary.
I've always admired your usage of close-ups, and you bring up the late call between Viola and Matt, where it's like close-ups. Can you tell us about editing that sequence?
Well, I mean, some of it is those are the best performances, and some of it is obviously you're saving the close-up for the really important moments in the scene, and Viola was so extraordinary in those close-ups. It was sort of, well, I have to use them. So it was one of those, I would have done it, I would have wanted to do it, and luckily she was phenomenal in those close-ups, so I was able to use them at the points in the scene. When I'm cutting, I was like, my idea is, what does the audience want to see next? I mean, that's what I have in my head, and at that moment, that's why I cut. Okay, I really want to go to this shot, or that, whatever it is. And luckily for me, I had the performance that Viola gave me in those close-ups, so I was able to use them.
Michael Jordan is in the ether of the film, but we don't see him. Can you tell us about the challenge from an editor? We see the back of his head, but throughout the film, we feel him.
Yeah, I mean, Ben and Alex, the screenwriter, made the decision early on to not show Michael. I mean, there was a point where we were going to show him once in the boardroom scene, and we tried it. We had, using AI technology, sort of manipulated the actor's face to look like a young Michael Jordan, but it felt like a gimmick when we did it. We looked at it once that way and never looked at it again, because it was clear that it wasn't supposed to be that way. Ben felt like, seeing Michael in the film was going to be so distracting, because everybody knows what Michael Jordan looks like. Everybody knows who he is, and it was like, he just didn't want that on the film, because it really wasn't about that. It was about Sonny, and then about Dolores and Sonny. So they made a decision to not show him, and the challenges that presented were immense. How do we get to feel what he's feeling without seeing his face? How do we know? So luckily for me, especially in the scene, that boardroom scene, I was able to use body language. You can see him shifting in his seat, putting his head on his hand, and those moments, like, oh, he's bored. And then Sonny and Howard White see that, and they're panicked, and that's why Sonny stands up and says, like, stop this film and let's let me talk to you one-on-one. And you know, it was also because of Viola and James, or sorry, Dolores and James. You know, in that scene especially, they're looking at Michael. Michael's looking at them. So you're reading what Michael's feeling based on seeing his parents. And so I think you know, he's like looks at the contract and looks at his dad. You could see, you know, you feel the reaction. At least I think you do. You can feel the reaction that Michael has based on how his parents are reacting. So you know, and the great thing is, you know, they're really husband and wife. So there was a magic between them that only comes between a real husband and wife. So the looks between them, the looks to Michael, it just really served the story and served what I was trying to do as an editor in a great way, because you know, they're so expressive.
I'm glad you brought up that scene, because editing-wise, from my vantage point, I love you know, the presentation scene where you use stock footage and then it stops and then we go to Matt Damon and then you like put little, you know, snippets of footage. Can you talk about how did you come about the dynamic of that scene?
Right. Well, as written, I mean, it's written in the script that way, but as written, once those flash forwards started, it was almost like Matt's dialogue was going to be a voiceover, and it was a lot of stock footage. It was, and I cut it that way at first because that's the way the script was, and it was good, but it was, Ben and I looked at each other and said,
so we saw footage and we heard
Matt. I mean, we were in that boardroom, but we went away from it and saw, like, you know, a lot more of Michael's highlights and more things in his life, and what we came to understand was that it looked like a Michael Jordan highlight film reel, and you can go on YouTube and see that. So what was important to us was that Matt pitching him, and you know, at that point the audience is almost Michael, because Matt's almost looking right at the camera. So we become Michael, hearing that pitch, and then seeing, you know, his life and as it's going to unfold. And the shorter those pieces got, the better the scene became. So they become, like you said, like snapshots of what's going to happen.
subliminal almost.
Yeah, because so many, his life is so well known, and these things, you know, you don't need to, you know, to see much more than any more than we put in the film. And the more we did that, and the more we stay with Michael, the more we stay with Matt, the better the scene got. So, and that was a scene when I read the screenplay, I knew that this is going to be the hardest scene in the film, and I'll be working on this right up into the end, and that was what happened, because it was a real, you know, it's a very grounded film, and to do something like that, we sort of changed the cinematic language of the film and do this flash forward thing, which we did nowhere else in the film. And it's one of those things when you screen it, you hold your breath and hope that the audience responds to it, and they did. So it was quite successful.
It's a remarkable sequence. You've done this before in Argo. You won the Oscar for Argo, where we know the outcome, but there's, yes. We know the outcome of Argo, and in this film, we know the outcome, but you still build tension and excitement, and we forget what the outcome is. Can you walk us through, from an editor's point of view, how did you achieve that tension?
Well, part of it is as simple as I pretend I don't know the end. I mean, I'm editing like I don't know the end. But I think the tool that I use the most is the characters. I mean, and playing what's happening with them, playing the subtext of each character, like what Sonny's going through, what Dolores is going through, and getting the audience as invested as I can in those characters, so that the audience is so involved with them and so rooting for Sonny and Dolores that they forget, you know. And I think that we were successful in doing that in Argo, and we were successful in doing that in this film. And I think it's one of those things where you're so rooting for Sonny and you're so on board with him and his journey that you just, you know, you let yourself go with that character and you don't even think about it until, you know, and hopefully you're on the edge of your seat because of that.
But, I mean, pardon me for being ignorant, but you are aware that the audience is gonna knows the outcome, and you're fighting against that, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, I have to pretend that they don't. Otherwise, I would edit it a completely different way, you know. And I think when my mind is in that sort of mindset of like, okay, how's this going to turn out? And you know, you try and leave scenes on cliffhangers. You know, you try and never like, you know, leave every scene on the with the audience on the edge of a cliff, so that they're so drawn in that they hopefully forget you know, or at least for that moment, forget what how it's going to turn out. You know, and I think that's all about investing in the characters, like I said, and especially when you have actors like Matt and Viola and, you know, and Ben, I think the audience gets so invested that they're rooting for them so hard that the story becomes about their personal journey and not so much, yeah, we know obviously that Nike's going to be, you know, or the Air Jordan shoe is going to be, you know, the most successful thing in you know, in shoe history. But you know, but you don't know Matt's journey, and you don't know Dolores' journey. So hopefully, I get them so invested in that's what they're, you know, that's why they're on the edge of the seat.
When I introduced the film, I mentioned the usage of songs and that there's no traditional score, but you go beyond that. You use the songs as transitions. You use the songs as like a Greek chorus. You know, can you tell us about the you know, the journey, you know, the development?
Yeah, as written, I think there were 3 or 4 songs in the script, and then you know, that were written into the script. And about a week or 2 before we started shooting, Ben came to me and said, "I want to use a lot of songs." And I thought, great, I've never done that as an editor, so I can't wait. And I grew up in the 80s, so all those songs are very personal to me. I mean, and we actually not fought, but fought, you know, friendly fighting about songs. Like I put something in and he would say, no, put this in. And I would go, come on, you know, we would sort of friendly argue about it. And, you know, he won mostly, but, you know, he's the director and the producer, star. And he owns the company. So we were constantly trying different songs and what worked, you know, whether it was the feel of the song or whether it was specifically the lyrics of the song sometimes worked, but a lot of times it was just the feel, and it was mixed so brilliantly by our re-recording mixer, Andy Nelson, who's, you know, done, I think he has like 23 Oscar nominations or something. You know, because that can be a very herky-jerky thing if not mixed properly. And he was so seamless and made the ins and outs of the song so beautiful that it just keeps the film flowing, and it gives it an energy. It puts the audience in that time period, you know, along with all that production design and the costumes. It was so spot on, all that stuff, that it just puts the audience right into the middle 80s. And then when we were going to have a composer like you do in a film, and a couple of guys we went after weren't available. And meanwhile, we're shooting, and I started putting temp music in, and I started using, you know, score from films from the 80s, you know, 3 O'Clock High, Desperately Seeking Susan, Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah, I kept
Tangerine Dream.
Yeah, it was a lot of Tangerine Dream. So, and it was working so well, and it put you in that period so beautifully that Ben called me one day and said, "What if we just buy it all?" And I thought, that's a great idea. I have no idea what that costs, and it ended up costing about what a composer would cost. So we temped the whole thing, you know, or I temped the whole thing with a score from the 80s, and we went after the film was complete, we went and bought it all.
But you know, it's not just putting on songs from the 80s. They work so well with the script. You know, like I mentioned to you, All I Need Is a Miracle.
Yeah.
Like the lyrics and the tunes actually are like a Greek chorus. They tell us.
Right. They do a lot of storytelling for us. I mean, Big Country, that song, you know, in a big country, that when Matt goes to North Carolina, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's so beautiful. And then like you know, some of them were like, you know, My Adidas was, they talk about it, the song My Adidas, that we talk about it in the movie, and that that was written into the script, or at least that was definitely going in that spot from day one. You know, a lot of the other stuff was a lot of trial and error and a lot of back and forth with, you know, then what happens is you have all this music that you want to buy, and then the price tag comes and it's incredibly high. So then you have to sort of, okay, we want those 10 for sure, and like we can, we have to then find replacements that do just as good a job, and often it was better than what we had originally. So it was sort of a lot of times it worked out for the better of the film, even though it was about money at one point, but then it became like, wait, this is better than what we had before, and it's less money, conveniently. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a lot of back and forth with Ben and I. He was brilliant at picking things, and I contributed, I hope, to some of the songs. But Ben, I have to give a lot of credit to on that. I mean, he really was single-minded about some of the placement and songs he wanted to use, and he was spot on many times.
The opening montage sets it incredibly, and it's got, I Want My MTV and all the footage and stuff. How much fun was it editing that?
A lot of fun. I mean, it was open-ended. It was like anything I wanted to use from 1984. I mean, just all the commercials and the pop culture references and the political references. The film originally, as written, was just supposed to open with a Converse commercial, and then bang, we go into Nike. And Ben felt like, similar to Argo, that he wanted to contextualize the film and put people in that mood and in that mindset. So he came up with this idea of using all this pop culture, and then while we were shooting, between takes and between setups, he had an 8mm camera, a 16mm camera, and a video camera, a really old school 1980s video camera. And he shot tremendous amounts of footage of all the people in the bullpen and all around our Nike offices. And it looked similar to Argo. We did the same thing, and it looked like it was real footage from that time period. And I guess what Ben explained to me was that it was all based on a party they had at Nike, the goodbye party for the woman who came up with the idea for the Nike swoosh. There was all this home video footage of that party, and Ben got inspired by that to shoot all this stuff. So, I mean, I had hours and hours of it, and it was just, picking just the right pieces. And then, as written, the song was supposed to be "Dirty Laundry" by Don Henley, but then I put in the Dire Straits song, and it just seemed so perfect, pop culture-wise, that it never. Once we put it in, it never changed.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of stock footage, the film was shot in an Alexa, and then you have to blend in that footage with the stock footage. And I noticed that the color palette was made to look like the 1980s. I would love to hear you blending the stock footage with the modern
well,
stuff.
where we make the change in the movie, I mean, is right when Sonny is at the high school basketball game. They shot, half of that scene was shot with 16mm cameras, and half was shot with the Alexa. So what we did was we sort of feathered, and in that particular moment, the beginning of it is 16mm, then we sort of feather it out, and all of a sudden it's just Alexa, and hopefully it's pretty seamless. And
It comes across as that.
but what I found, and I've done a lot of movies with stock footage, and a lot of movies with where the aspect ratio changes from cut to cut,
Yeah.
And what I found is the audience, if the audience is with you, it doesn't matter. If they're into the moment, into the story, even in this film where it's just at the beginning, I think the audience is hooked with the music and all the images. And you can get away, I don't call it getting away, I think you can kind of do whatever you want. It's always about the story and being involved with the characters and being in the moment of the film, because you can go, from 4:3 to widescreen and back, and mostly people don't notice because they're involved in that particular moment in the story, and it doesn't really matter.
And I also noticed that there was like 3 to 5 cameras that were covering scenes. How, on your end, was it fun to have to edit 3 to 5 different cameras, or?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it fun. It makes it, like I said, I mean, I'm always imagining what do I want to see next, and when you have the shot, that's always fantastic. and he shot 5 cameras always on all the
Good.
phone calls.
I was counting 3 to 5, but
Yeah,
it's
five
5.
on all the phone. He shot 2 or 3 cameras on everything, but on the phone call scenes particularly, and there's a lot of them. He shot 5 cameras, and it was usually 2 on Matt and 3 on whoever else he was talking to. And the wonderful thing about the way he did it was that all the phone call scenes in this film were shot simultaneously, meaning they were all actually on the phone. We shot the whole film in a building in Santa Monica. The production office, the editing rooms, the costume department, the props, everything. The Nike office is 2 floors. I think it was like 24,000 square feet. It was all converted to be the Nike offices. So we were all under the same roof. So it was fun, and it was really efficient because everybody could talk to everybody, you know, just by like walking 10 feet down the hall. So like when Viola was on the phone with Matt, or Matt was on the phone with Jason Bateman, they were actually on the phone. 3 cameras on, like, well, Chris Messina, 3 cameras on Chris Messina, 2 cameras on Matt. So it made it so much easier because they did so much improvisation, especially with Chris Messina, that I actually had the correct responses. You know, sometimes they do improv. When actors do improv, it's very hard to make it work because the other actor is not, you know, is not reacting to the stuff that was shot on the other side of it. So this made it so much more real and so much easier and more fun to do the way he shot it. And the beautiful thing about phone calls is, you know, when you're on the phone with somebody, you know, they can't see you, so you can be talking to them like you're so happy to talk to them, so happy to hear them, and meanwhile, you know, going, fuck, you know what I mean, or rolling your eyes, or like Matt pumping his fist, or Viola Davis takes the phone away because she doesn't want to hear what he has to say at that moment. All that sort of extra body language and nonverbal communication you can do and really make it exaggerated. Like Chris Messina playing with that sword, you know, he just sort of doing that. It was a prop that he had on the set, and he just started messing around with it. All that stuff, it adds a layer, so that, you know, normal dialogue scene doesn't have. So, because on the surface, a phone call, you can say, oh, it's a phone call, people just, you know, so that's boring. But it actually, when you start thinking about it, it adds all the stuff that the actors can do, you know, that they couldn't do if you're just sitting face to face with someone.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes is the Jason Bateman and Vaccaro, you know, talking about being a team player, et cetera. And I love your editing of that sequence. Can you tell us about anything interesting?
Well, I mean, everything I do is about how do I tell the story in the best way, in the most efficient way. And like I was saying earlier, and it's, to me, especially with a screenplay like this, is such a strong screenplay. The sort of A story tells itself in a way. I mean, and so I'm trying to tell what the subtext. So, like, again, to try and I find that's the best way to get the audience invested with the characters. So I'm looking for moments in the footage that feel like real human reactions, like that feels to me totally real, and I build the scenes around that. So whatever and that's the story of what each character is going through. So that's the way I always edit, because, you know, I got taught early on in my career that, you know, unless the audience is invested in the characters, you know, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be on the ride with you. So I'm always looking for those moments, and I'm sure in that scene I was doing the same thing.
The Nike principles, you break up sequences with the Nike principles. Was that in the script, or was that something you came up with?
That actually was, I mean, that was my idea, yeah. What happened was in the very first scene with Sonny, when Sonny says, I got to go see the shoe dog, and it's the first scene with he and Phil, and or him and Phil, and he points to Matt points to the Nike principles, and you say this, and you don't really know what they are, because it just, you know, it's a quick flash of it, and it's really hard to take in. So I thought, you know, let's use these as chapter headings. So we that's what we did, you know, and we tried to find the ones that related to what was happening at that point in the film. And then Ben went back and shot a lot of additional coverage of that sign or that, you know, poster, I guess, I don't know. He shot a lot, and he shot each individual, you know, principle for me to use as chapter headings during the film, and I think it really sort of puts the audience right in there with Nike. You know, right? You feel like everything that Phil thought of as an owner of a company.
Yeah, and at the end, you give us the master shot of all.
Yeah, you see him above Ben laying on the couch there. Yeah, that shot was specifically designed for that, and then to see how much the shoe made. You know, that shot was specifically made so you'd see like how much the shoe made in his first year.
Oh, great. You mentioned about the production offices and shooting and the set, and the editorial offices were there. So you were, as they were shooting, you are getting the dailies and you're working your little voodoo?
Yeah, luckily for me, this building had sort of I think it was like they did voiceovers for animated shows or something. So my office was completely soundproof just by luck. And so, because there were times where, like that boardroom scene my assistant's office was next to mine, and right next to that was where they shot the boardroom scene. So my assistant couldn't make any noise that day because the walls weren't, you know, it's not a sound stage, it's just an office. So we had to be real quiet. Like there were so many days like that. I would open the door and like they were shooting the movie right there. So the benefit of it was that I got so much more face time with Ben because, you know, when you're acting and directing and he's doing some writing and all the other things he had to do, like in a normal film, I would be off somewhere else. And on this film, he was right there, so he could come between setups. I would sometimes come in the morning very early, and he was already in my editing room messing around with stuff, which always made me nuts. But, I mean, Ben, you know, like a lot of directors, Ben knows how to use the machine. But he doesn't, you know, I mean, he's not an editor. I mean, he's phenomenally talented in a lot of different areas. But, you know, I've been doing this longer than him.
And you have an Oscar for it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, like I said, I got a lot of FaceTime with him, and there were many times in the film where I would show him stuff, and I was cutting very quickly. So if he shot something on Monday, by late Tuesday, I had it cut. So he would come in, look at it, and then sometimes we would say, "I'm like, you know, we need this cutting from here to here. We need a transition. And then Matt would come in, and the three of us would sit there, at, you know, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and you know, knock around ideas like, well, okay, how do we get from here to here and make a transition? And you know, we just all come up with these ideas, and then they would literally shoot it the next day. I mean, there was a couple of times where we came up with an idea, and they were okay, we'll be right back. And they would go off literally just down the hall and shoot what we were just talking about, you know, because the whole set was lit, you know, so they could shoot anywhere on the set they wanted. So it was really fun. It was so immediate, you know, like, and it was watching the two of them together. I mean, they've known each other since they were 12 or something like that, and
yeah,
they're best friends, and they are like so connected, you know, that it's really something to see. And sitting in the room with them, I kept thinking, oh my God, I get to be here for this. It was so exciting, you know, to watch. They're both so smart. And then also he would bring the actors in all the time to show them cut footage. And I think it let the actors know, that the film was working and that they're good. And it also informed their performances. You know, they see where they are at given moments in the film, and they know like where they're coming from, where they're going to performance-wise. And I think, you know, I think it really helped them all because they, you know, like it would be like Chris Tucker's here and Jason Bateman's here, and you know, they would just watch the footage, and it was going together really well. And Ben was happy with the way it was cut, and you know, it was so much credit to everybody who did such an amazing job on the film. Everybody, you know, up and down every department. But I think that was really valuable for the actors as well. So. It was also really fun.
Yeah. Speaking of fun, I've seen this film multiple times, and I never get tired of watching it. And several people that were coming in said that they've seen the movie multiple times. And every time I watch it, there's a buoyancy. There's just so much joy in watching the film. What is your take on?
You know, I've been thinking about that a lot, actually, and what I realize is, I mean, first of all, it's got a great pace to it, I think,
Thanks to you.
Well, thanks to, yeah, I guess. I don't know. That's not who I am, but you know, it's a race against the clock for Nike. They're trying to get past Adidas. They're trying to get past Converse. You know, there's a limited amount of time before Michael's going to sign. So it has that urgency, and I wanted to have that sort of ticking clock feeling. But on top of that, you know, this is all about Sonny and his, you know, and all about hope. You know, Sonny's has this dream, and has this hope to sign Michael, and you know, that's very fragile, and he's constantly keeping that ball in the air, you know, and it has that kind of energy. So I tried to edit the film with using Sonny's energy, you know, that, you know, once he doesn't believe for one split second, the whole thing falls apart. So I just kind of keep, like you say, that buoyancy and it's kind of a feel thing, you know. I can't say like, oh, I did this to do that, you know. It's like I just cut and cut and cut until it felt that way. It felt right to me, and felt like it had that buoyancy, had that joy, had that sort of the joy of sticking to your beliefs and you know, living, you know, trying to, and never questioning, you know, this great idea that you've had, and no matter what anybody says, and I'm glad to hear that it comes across that way.
And before I let you go, you're working on your dream project, Unstoppable. Directing. Can you tell us a little about it?
Yeah, we were in the middle of shooting it when the writer's strike happened, so we got about a little more than a third through it, and it's a story about this man named Anthony Robles, who walked on as a college wrestler at Arizona State University, and in 2011 he won the national championship, and he was born with no right leg, with missing his right leg and missing his right hip. So he wrestled that way and managed to win the national championship. And the other side of the story is his family life, which was incredibly difficult, and a very abusive stepfather, and his mom was sort of checked out because she was so physically and verbally abused by the stepfather, and how he managed to take care of his family, worked 3 jobs, I don't know when he slept, and go on to become a national champion, and then turned his life around, turned his whole family's life around, and you know, now works for ESPN. He's a motivational speaker, and he's just an incredible human being. So, and it just felt like it just really landed with me, as I'm an ex-athlete, and the story landed with me, and then I met him, and I've never met anybody like it. So I felt like I had to tell the story.
That's fantastic. Well, I personally can't wait. I'm a big fan. Thank you for being here tonight.
My pleasure.